Having finally been told the nature of her role in the blood hunt conflict, Brielle Brooks's bad day has gotten even worse. Not only are vampires attacking the whole world, they are being led by her dad. And it looks like she's the only one who can kill him. Angry and scared, Brielle takes out her emotions on some stupid vampires who tried to make a meal out of her. A pair of them get the drop on her, wounding her by slashing at her stomach, and Daredevil jumps in to help. They beat the vampires, and Brielle warily eyes her savior. She thinks that he knows about Blade, and that she has to kill him, which she won't do. And suddenly Brielle starts to collapse. She snaps open a case on her belt and pulls out a bottle of pills. Just before she passes out, Brielle tells Daredevil who her father is. Eventually, Brielle comes to on a rooftop. Her vampire powers healed her up while she was out. She explains that the pills help her maintain control when she's either smelled too much blood or lost enough of her own. The pair then discuss Brielle's crappy situation. She just met her pops. He trained her a little bit, sure, but what, she's supposed to believe that he did that so that she could hunt him down and kill him in the maybe future? Maybe someone's possessed him, or it's a shapeshifter, she suggests. Has anyone even looked into that idea?
And no, they haven't, Brielle. And yes, I agree, they should.
Daredevil feels for her, more than she knows. He has walked down dark paths before. Thankfully, he had friends and family willing to not just fight for him, but to fight him, to bring him back out of the darkness. Sometimes being a hero means facing a villain that you care about. Sometimes it means saving the part of them that would hate the thing that they've become. It isn't easy, but the choice is yours, Daredevil says. The pair hug, which is when Dracula finally catches up. Daredevil is immediately and understandably defensive of Brielle. He knows that Dracula can't be trusted. If Brielle needs to go to Doctor Strange, hey, that's great, that's one thing, but she ain't going with you. The pair of them fight, and Dracula just wins. Like, I won't say it's not a contest, but Dracula's enhanced speed and strength is just too much for Daredevil. And author Danny Lore even makes a point earlier in the issue of having Brielle notice Daredevil's fighting style, comparing him to her father and to Dracula, and where they are both great fighters, there is an elegance to Daredevil that they don't have. She describes it more as almost watching someone dance through the battlefield, where Dracula is pure power and Blade is pure skill, which is an interesting comparison to make, but it does show you why Dracula is able to overpower him here now. It's a nice little setup and payoff. Dracula does not kill Daredevil, of course, because he's trying to win Brielle's trust, but it is clear that he could if he wanted to. Brielle interrupts the fight and then agrees to go back to the Sanctum. She gets it. She's thought about it, she doesn't like it, but she understands what has to happen. After walking part of the way back, Brielle stops to call her mom. She gets her mother's voicemail and she leaves her an honestly really touching message. Brielle essentially says that she can't do it. If being a hero means what she has been told it means today, then she is so sorry, Mom, because she can't be that. Lost in her own emotions, thinking about her parents, Brielle's situational awareness fails her. Vampires encircle her and Dracula, and then Brielle's eyes go red. Her vampire senses kick into overdrive. It overwhelms her, and something suddenly clobbers the back of her head. Standing over her unconscious body is the transformed body of Blade. His body is like a mass of red and black, like of shadows and amorphous energy, it seems. His ears are large like bats, his pupils are gone. It's almost like you wanted me to find you, Blade says. My name is Ben, and this is Breakdown's coverage of Blood Hunt Episode 9, Brielle Brooks's Worst Day Ever. I have one big problem with this issue in particular, and I want to address it before I get into all the good stuff that I do like about the issue. Because it's a big one. It's a key motivating part of this comic, and it is the stated law that Brielle has to be the one to kill Blade. Right now, given what we've seen and given what we know about Bloodhunt, there seems to be no reason for this to be true. First off, why the rule that Brielle has to do it at all? Dracula claims that it is because Brielle is the last of Blade's bloodline, but so? Who cares? It's never been a rule that, like, a specific person has to be related to a vampire in order to kill them. If that's the case, we've got a lot of Avengers doing some vampire killing to really ask some questions about. If this is a Blade-specific thing, then why is it a Blade-specific thing? There's no explanation. There's no anything here, and I would have expected it to be in this comic if it was going to not be in the main series. This is Dracula. He's one of the oldest living vampires on the planet. If the main bad guy in this is Varney, Varney is the guy who turned Dracula into a vampire. He should know more about vampires than anybody else that the good guys have on their side at this point. If anybody is going to break out some kind of weird vampire prophecy about how only the chosen bloodline can kill Blade, it would be Dracula. But we don't get anything like that here. Perhaps most importantly, why does anyone trust him? He's Dracula. When Tigra called him out for being, Dracula, I was like, thank you so much, madam. If I was Brielle, I wouldn't even believe him. He'd be like, oh, you need to kill your father. And I'd be like, dude, screw yourself. He's an ancient evil that will do anything he must to get what he wants. Why would anyone believe anything Dracula says here? It boggles my mind. And third, Blade could be possessed. And I am so glad that author Danny Lore finally brings this up in this story because it's a strong possibility. It's been my main theory since the story began. Why are we not calling in some telepaths here? Why not have Doctor Strange call up Emma Frost of the X-Men and then have them yank whatever is inside of Blade's head out of it? Or even better, perform an exorcism, my dude. Somebody call a priest. We've got Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler's ordained. There we go. Nightcrawler's an ordained priest. Have him teleport his blue furry butt over here and exorcise Blade. Why is everybody so dead set on killing Blade when it's not even necessary? Did they all just secretly hate him all this time and they were like, God, that Blade guy's so cool. We better get rid of him. There's just so many leaps in story logic happening here that I'm just sick of them at this point. If there is a reason why Brielle must be the one to kill Blade, I'm fine with that from a storytelling perspective. But tell me the reason! I will buy in. I am down for this as a plot point. But if you're going to give me nothing and then just keep repeating the notion because eventually I'll have to accept it, then I'm going to complain the whole time. Outside of this facet of the story, I actually really enjoyed this issue otherwise, which surprises me because I haven't really liked Brielle as a character up to this point in the stuff that I've read her in. While Brielle has killed some vampires in Atlanta before, she isn't really an experienced superhero. She's definitely a part-timer. She's never dealt with any of this kind of stuff on this scale before. Her running away from her problem feels like a natural response, and so does her taking out some of her anger on some of the nearby vampires. And once she has had a chance to catch her breath, I even like her talking things out with Daredevil. When I saw the cover for Dracula issue 2 and I saw that Daredevil was on the cover, I thought that was a weird character pull for this particular series. You don't typically think Daredevil and vampires, but given the story elements we're discussing here, this actually makes a lot of sense. Daredevil as a character has faced his own inner darkness several times in his history. The two times I'm most personally familiar with is the Shadowland storyline from 2010, which saw Daredevil possessed by an evil demonic force that runs the ninja warrior death cult called The Hand, and then more recently in Chip Zdarsky's run on Daredevil, the character kind of had his own faction of The Hand, and he was trying to redeem / work for redemption a couple of supervillains, and he was basically doing some evil stuff in order to try to accomplish some good. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, after all. But basically, Daredevil is a character who has been before where Blade is now. And so that I do appreciate that he is the one who is trying to communicate how important it is to Brielle for her to fight back. However, no one tried to kill Daredevil in those storylines. In fact, all of the friends who did confront Daredevil did so with the express purpose of saving Matt from himself. So the idea that Daredevil would show up and be like, well, Dracula says you gotta kill your dad, because it's the moral right, sympathetic thing to do for him. Why don't we try saving him? Why are we not trying to save him? Show him some courtesy, dude. Brielle, otherwise, is the star of this issue, which I won't lie, bummed me out a little bit. I just wanted more Dracula in general, and if you're going to call this book Dracula: Blood Hunt, Dracula should be the lead character. If you wanted this to be Bloodline: Blood Hunt, you could have done that. That said, the Brielle stuff works really well. Her inexperience is showing, as is her youthful optimism, which I'm always a fan of. I love that she did take a moment to call her mom at the end. It feels like a really stupid move for her to be walking back to the Sanctum Sanctorum. The world's under attack by vampires. You know your dad is sending vampire hit squads after you at this point. And you're standing next to Dracula, and you're like, you know what? Drac, can you get like 15 feet away from me? I want to call my mom. I'm really worried about her. You can call and walk at the same time. You really can. But it is a really good emotional moment because Blade, as a character, wasn't around when Brielle was growing up. He was out killing vamps. And so Brielle has ended up being super close with her mom. There hasn't really been a lot of the usual tropish lying about superpowers or hiding her secret identity or sneaking out at night in Brielle's story so far. Saffron knew what she was getting into when she dated and then married Blade and then had his child. She isn't an idiot. And honestly, the relationship between Brielle and her mom was easily one of my favorite parts of the Bloodline miniseries in 2023. And there's not a lot of favorite parts that I have in that, so it was nice to see it reflected and continued here. It makes sense, given that author Danny Lore wrote Bloodline and is now writing this, so it's a nice through line for the character. We then end on the cliffhanger of, like, transformed vampire Blade attacking her, which appears to promise a direct confrontation next issue. They're not going to kill Blade in a tie-in, so I doubt that they're going to have a definitive fight, but maybe this next issue will prove to Brielle that she has to kill her dad, or maybe she'll figure out that she needs to depossess him instead. In either case, I am eager to read it, and I do like the idea that Blade took to training Brielle as a potential precaution of him going bad. That does sound like a very Blade thing to do, and it's kind of a nice retcon justification for that happening in the Bloodline miniseries as a through line for the Blade ongoing series, and then now here in Blood Hunt. Given that these story elements have been handed by multiple different authors with probably a handful of editorial teams, it's kind of cool. This is one of the things that I love about the shared storytelling of the Marvel and DC universes, is taking these kind of different pieces that were written and created by different people that have a through line of Blade, and that's it. There's no ongoing plot line happening here, but taking these dots and then connecting them with enough fiber that you go, oh, maybe Blade was training Brielle in case he ever went bad. And then, because of the events of Blade, he has gone bad, as we're seeing here in Blood Hunt. That's really cool. And suddenly, the Bloodline miniseries has a little bit more of a justified role in my collection. And I really like that kind of storytelling. This issue really did have some dialogue problems as well. When Brielle first meets Daredevil, there's just so much weirdness going on. So much isn't very well explained. So Brielle sees Daredevil and she's like, hey, you know about my dad? And he's like, lady, I've never even met you. I don't know who you are. And on the one hand, I kind of get a kick out of Brielle's assumption that all the superheroes in New York know each other, because they do, to be quite honest. As a meta aware guy who's read all of these comics, I know that all of these characters have met each other. But Blade is a super private person. He has absolutely hidden the existence of Saffron and Brielle for years in order to protect them from his enemies. So the idea that she's like, oh, you've seen me, you know who my dad is. And Daredevil's just like, no, I do not know who your dad is. Can you explain to me what's going on here? Was a little bit funny, but then Brielle is so hyped up from her conversation with Miles and Doctor Strange and Clea and all those guys that she's just not willing to listen. I do think that the pill plot point was really underexplained and undersold. And if it's going to be such an unimportant piece of Brielle's story, why is it even a piece of her story anyways? So I do think that's a little funky. There's also a moment when Dracula first shows up again, where he looks at Daredevil and he's like, there's a vampire invasion of New York going on and you've just got the girl on the rooftop? What are you, an idiot? And I appreciate the idea of, like, this is a strategically bad place to be, because Daredevil literally just took this girl, carried her to a rooftop, laid her out, and then waited for her to heal up. That could have taken 5 minutes, it could have taken a half hour, and if the vampires are attacking the entire planet and they're looking for Brielle, you'd really think you would have been facing some more danger there. So I do think author Danny Lore is kind of going, I get that I did not do a good job here, so I'm having Dracula point out that this is a stupid move, so Daredevil looks dumb as opposed to me, which I don't like as a storytelling technique. They did it in the Bumble movie when John Cena's character was like, they're called Decepticons. How could we trust them? That doesn't make you smart, because then you still had people trust them. If you had him go, they're called Decepticons, guys, do you get it? And then they went, you know what? That's a really good point. We shouldn't trust them. Let's kill them. Okay, then you get it, I feel like. But you don't get a pass just because you point out your own mistakes in story and have someone else go, I get that it's a mistake. The last thing I want to comment on is there is a really great moment when Brielle and Dracula are walking back to the Sanctum Sanctorum, and Brielle's like, man, I'm having a real hard time with this. I want to call my mom. And Dracula's just like, oh, the stakes of this have been explained to you. You really should get it by now. Why are you being such a baby about this? And it's so clear that Dracula is disconnected from his humanity and any kind of personal connection to anyone else. And Brielle even says, she's like, man, my dad said that you were not good with people stuff, and you are not good with people stuff. Like, he was right. And I think that's a really cool way of showing you that for as much as he looks like a human, and as much as Dracula's been a good guy in this miniseries, he's just not a good person. He isn't connecting with people. There's no emotional connection to Brielle. He is not protective of her because he likes her or because it's right to be protective of her. He is protective of her because she is the only tool that can kill Blade, as far as he knows. And so I think that's a really good examination of the character, and given that this is a Dracula miniseries, you'd think we would be getting a little more Dracula examination as opposed to Brielle. So I like that we got something at the very least. Next episode, we're going to bounce back to the Avengers with Avengers issue 15 as they continue their fight against my least favorite vampire in the world, Baron Blood. If you enjoyed this episode of Breakdown, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you are not subscribed to the show, then click on that as well. I love getting feedback, and I would really appreciate it if you did so. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to suggest a comic or a series to me, Breakdown can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and on a variety of podcast platforms, with links in the description for this episode below, as well as the email cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Thank you for your time and attention.